All right, so here we are in Yamera. It is a manual camera app that is free, but unfortunately because it's free, it is supported by ads. So ads will take up some of the screen real estate here. I'm going to push in just so we crop that out because we don't need to look at it right now. We're going to just run through the controls really quick. We are in photo mode, not video mode, but this is where you would change the mode. This is video mode. This is photo mode. You can tell which one because the button tells you which one you're going to switch to. Also, when you're in film mode or video mode, the shutter button becomes a red. So this is film mode now. Your main controls down here. So we'll start right here. I've got the iPhone 13 Pro, so I have the 3 lenses. And so if I tap this plus button, I can go to my telephoto camera. If I tap the Y button, or sorry, the minus button, that's the ultra wide camera. And if I just tap the 1 by, that's the usual camera. The first control we're going to look at is focus. You could set focus automatically just by tapping on the screen where you want to focus on. You can see if I tap on the background, then my foreground gets soft and out of focus. If I tap on the foreground, then my foreground gets sharp and my background gets soft and out of focus. But we can set that manually. Top of the focus, come out of auto, click locked, and then using this slider, you can set focus manually. So here we are here on the foreground and moving to the background. And you can see the further back we go, the more out of focus the foreground becomes. And now we're coming back, midground, and foreground. Right about there. Go back to auto and tap focus again to close that tab. Next is the exposure control. Exposure handles image brightness, but also does a couple of other things. So auto again is, if you tap, here, let me close that so we can take a look. If you want to, you tap on the part of the image that you want to have just middle exposure. So say I want to expose down here, dark in the dark areas, I could tap there. That'll focus and bring exposure to that point, but we're blowing out the windows. Say I want to expose for the windows, I could tap there. It's going to focus there and also expose for the windows. And so you can see that the shadow areas get darker while the windows become more in exposure. But we could set all that manually in the exposure tab. And you would go from auto to locked, gives you access to bias, which just is sort of like a general exposure control. And you can see that as you're shifting the bias around, shutter and ISO is changing automatically. Or if you put it into custom, then that gives you manual control over shutter speed and ISO. So we'll start with ISO first. ISO is the chip's sensitivity to light. And so as you turn ISO up, the image will get brighter, but that's just a digital boost. And so the image will also get noisier, kind of like grainier, but with the digital processes, we call it noise, and it falls apart in a different way than grain. So we turn that up. You see the image is just getting brighter overall. Turn that down, image is getting darker. Generally want to keep the ISO as low as possible for the cleanest image, the least amount of noise. Next is shutter speed. So shutter speed is fractions of a second. So you can see right now our shutter speed is 1/121. So basically 1/120th of a second. So as you slow down the shutter speed, you let in more light. So the slower of a shutter speed means the image is going to get brighter. So here we are at 1/20th of a second, 1/10th of a second, and this will let us slow all the way down to looks like 1/2, or that's 1 second. So this is a shutter speed of 1 second. So that absolutely will work to do long exposures. 1 second is a fairly long shutter speed. And then as we speed up the shutter speed, there we go, we let in less light. So the faster the shutter speed, the smaller the fraction amount of time that the shutter is open, less light is entering the lens and exposing the image. You can see that the frame is just getting darker. And it looks like the fastest shutter speed this app will let us do is 1/1000th of a second. Cool. So now you can see we've got a very different looking image. The inside area here is very dark and moody. The outside area is in good exposure, or we can expose for the inside. If I slow down the shutter speed a little bit, that looks good. And this gives you really good control over exactly what your image is going to look like. All right, swing back to auto, and here we are on auto, and you can see the word exposure is red, so that means that something is still set on it. And so we could always return bias. Bias is, again, just your making the image brighter or darker, letting the app select if it's going to change shutter speed and ISO. So you can always just return that to 0, and now you're in full auto exposure again. White balance. White balance is the same sort of thing. We have two controls. We have temperature, which swings warm and cool, orange and blue, and then we have tint, which swings green and magenta. And so let's take our temp down, and you can see that we are cooling down the image. If we take our temp up, we can see that we are warming up the image. Let's do like an average there. And then let's watch the tint. Adding magenta to our image. If we swing it down, it's going to add green to the image. You know, and these operate independent of each other. If you happen to have like a white sheet of paper or specifically a gray card, a photographic tool like this, if you hold it in front of the lens and then just tap the word gray card, and that's going to set your white balance to that. So that's like a professional tool setting. You don't need to have that, but it's pretty cool that this app has that. All right, swing back to auto, close white balance. And then preset, just you can make presets for yourself in this app. If you pay for the professional settings, you can take pictures in RAW format. That's not necessary. This control turns the flash on and off. 4:3 is the aspect ratio. So if we tap on that, we can see our different aspect ratios. We can get square, or we can get 16:9, so like a video aspect ratio, or this is like the aspect ratio of Instagram stories. Go back to standard. The hand is turning the touch selection, so like, you know, tap to focus, tap to exposure, on and off. So if you turn that off, then you can't like tap to expose or tap to focus. Turn that back on. T is for adding text. If you want to add text to your screen, this is fairly limited. You have different templates that you can use. A lot of them are locked behind a paywall. You can do different colors, different settings for like how the text appears. Anyways, I never use that. And then the grid lines to help you compose your image. I highly recommend you use those. And last but not least, you have the timer setting. This gives you a 3-second timer, 5-second, and 10-second timer. Last but not least is the shutter button to take a picture, and you could also use the volume buttons to take pictures.